Welcome, Jet fans, to another episode of Jets Life Podcast. In this episode, we'll recap the NFL draft and the players that the Jets selected. But before we do so, if you can, just hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow, and your support is always greatly appreciated. So the draft got started. I was pretty out front. My last episode, I did make it clear that I was hoping that the Jets would address the skill position players, mainly being the wide receivers, whether it be a trade up from Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, or Roma Dunze. As the board was trickling down, everything kind of started falling the way that we had expected. Three quarterbacks went. Marvin Harrison went four. Offensive lineman went five. No trade up for a quarterback. I know I did plug that in there as being a possibility. I did think it would happen, but it didn't. Offensive lineman and wide receiver went four and five. Malik Neighbors went six. So everything was kind of falling the way you would expected. Seven went another offensive lineman, J.C. Latham, went to Tennessee, and then he got to pick eight, and that's where I kind of identified a potential trade up for the Jets. Just jump a couple of spots from 10 to 8, get a Dunze, and call it a day. That did not happen. I don't think there was really much interest from Atlanta to make a trade, because if they would have traded out, they would have lost out on probably the first major shock of the draft, which was them picking Michael Penix as a quarterback, leaving the door wide open for Roma Dunze to pair up with Caleb Williams in Chicago, and the Jets picking at 10. The Jets did a smart move here. They obviously fielded calls with the three teams picking them behind them. 11, 12, and 13 were the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders, all picking consecutively. All teams that you would think would have some interest in a quarterback. They were able to make a trade, move back one spot to 11. Vikings traded up, picked McCarthy, and the Jets were able to make their first pick at number 11. And, when you go into this draft, the best player on the board at that moment in time was an offensive lineman. It just depended on which offensive lineman the Jets wanted. And in this particular scenario, the Jets picked a player in Fashanu out of Penn State, offensive tackle. Started there for 3 years, played limited games in his first 2 years of Penn State. One because of injury, got limited a little bit, but last year was an outstanding lineman. He has a stat that much interest to, and a lot of linkage to what happened with Sauce Gardner when he was coming out. There was a stat out there that Sauce did not allow a touchdown in his entire college career. Similarly, Fashanu, you hear different things. I've heard some say that he hasn't allowed a sack his entire career. Some say, depend on, I guess, how the assignment of the sack he did give up. They give one sack his entire college career. Regardless, it's an outstanding metric, something that this team needs. We haven't had a legitimate left tackle since, I mean, if you want to call Mekhi Becton's rookie year, a really good start, but truly a legitimate left tackle. I mean, we haven't seen one since DeBrickashaw Ferguson left for retirement. And this guy comes in. He's not going to be asked to start immediately. That's, first off, a good sign for a rookie. Someone that, and he can learn from two 33-year-old offensive linemen, players that know how to play in the NFL and know how to extend their career for a long time, in Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses. I don't think it's as cut and dry that Fashanu does not start this season. I think there's options for him to start. I'm I don't. I mean, it's even an option that he would be pushing for right tackle, move Moses to being like a swing tackle type. Um, there's also a left guard spot. I know the Jets signed John Simpson, but if you can get a guy that you draft in the first round to be your starting left tackle in the future, start getting him acclimated, put him right next to Tyron Smith, where he can learn a lot about how to play offensive line in the NFL. It's a good move. There was a lot of frustration. Brock Bowers is still on the board, but I think the Jets did the right thing here. At the end of the day, this draft really came down to addressing the offensive line with one of your top two picks, first and third round pick, I'm saying, and a wide receiver with your other pick. So I think based on this, we all kind of identified wide receiver is going to be the next pick. And the fear for me was that with the Jets picking at 72, you knew a lot of these names were going to start falling off the board, and they definitely did. Late in the first round, early in the second round, names just started popping off the board pretty quickly. Um, and then it got to the point where I was kind of eyeballing, and I think where it would have started becoming reasonable to trade up would have been around pick 55, 56, somewhere in that range. It wouldn't have cost you too much of your draft capital that they have in this draft. The Jets apparently had a lot of interest in their next selection in Malachi Corley, wide receiver out of Western Kentucky. Here's a guy that I think kind of fits something that the Jets really are in need of. From a skill position standpoint, we have Garrett Wilson who can take a slant and go the distance. We have Mike Williams who can get vertical, make the 80-20 catches as the Jets like to frame it out. But now they add a guy that can be. I know the name Deebo Samuel has been kind of thrown out there a lot, but if you look at like what the Jets have had in their history, a guy like Quincy Enunwa, what he did for this team was he was able to make the short catches and with his power and strength get through and make short plays into really long ones. And that's kind of what Malachi Corley has done in his career at Western Kentucky. 1,600 YAC yards over the last few years with Western Kentucky. That is an outstanding college career, let alone to do that in just yards after catch. And they did what they did was a lot of screen game, a lot of like short passes orchestrated to get him the ball in space so he can make plays after the catch. And he did very successful at that. I think there was that over the last 2 years, only three other receivers had more receiving yards than Malachi Corley, and those are the top three receivers that were picked in the first round. So, pretty good company. Obviously, you know, he's not those three players, but for the Jets, it's something that this team desperately needed. They just needed something different, a different flavor than the receivers they currently have on this roster, and I think Malachi Corley does fit that bill. Um, so I'm kind of stoked about that pick. Um, as we continue, it's been again another huge gap from pick to pick. The next pick for the Jets being number 134, where they pick Braylon Allen. This situation was one that was kind of interesting. The Jets had three fourth round picks at one point in time. One of those picks they traded to the Lions for a future third round pick, so they get a third round pick next year's draft. As a result of that, and another pick, another one of the fourth round picks they traded with Green Bay and were able to just move down the board a little bit. It was a trade that was kind of interesting. They actually lost. When you look at the draft value chart, it was a loss for them. So not really sure why in that scenario you would trade back and lose value instead of just making a pick at that point in time. Maybe there wasn't a player that they were in love with. They just wanted to move down a little bit and get extra shots at some of these day three players. But Braylon Allen comes in. He's Wisconsin running back, and Wisconsin typically known for running the football and the offensive line. We got Joe Tippmann here from Wisconsin as well. Um, there was when we were going through this process here a little bit. You started hearing about Braylon Allen being a little having concerns in pass protection. And I got to give a lot of credit to Joe RB for Jets X Factor. Does a fantastic job with all of his film review. There's some good stuff out there on him in pass protection. So, and there are, I mean, obviously he's given up sacks as well, but he doesn't seem like a guy that's gonna just get completely destroyed when he's sitting back there in third down situations. I think this is a good move here, and what it does for the Jets too. I think what an underrated need for the Jets this offseason was running back. After Brees Hall, you have Izzy Abanikanda, who, let's be honest, I mean the jury's out on him for sure. Didn't really see the field that much at all last season. The concerns from the Jets on Izzy was that he's not great in pass protection. So at first, when I saw that Braylon Allen also had deficiencies in pass protection, I was a little concerned there. But as I said again, it's obviously is more has to be looked at with Braylon Allen as it relates to pass protection. But I think the Jets, what they're really looking for here is a different running back. Again, just versatile from a running back room standpoint. Similar to what they would do wide receiver, they have now different flavors with all their players. Now they have a guy who can bruise, can hit the line, gain those tough yards, get get those yards on the goal line, and just give Brees Hall a little bit of a breather. Somebody that they believe in that can run behind a solid offensive line. I think that's kind of where the Jets were looking here with this pick. Again, major need, underrated that the Jets did desperately need to get a running back in here, and it looks like they're going the young running back route as opposed to going in the veteran market, since that market's pretty dried up as well at this point. The next pick the Jets had, and this is the first of 3 and 5 picks, Jordan Travis, quarterback out of Florida State. So obviously, after those first 6 quarterbacks, there was a major, major lull. After that, I think the next pick was Spencer Rattler, not too far ahead of Jordan Travis. It was like 150s that he was picked. And then it just came down to whether or not the Jets would go with Jordan Travis or Michael Pratt. In this scenario, they did go with Jordan Travis. And here's the upside to this one is this guy was a leader for Florida State. The guy had them on the brink of the national championship playoff, but his injury was just far too much for the college football committee to ignore. Having a team go in there without a starting quarterback was pretty alarming, at least in the eyes of the college football committee. Even though we saw Ohio State in the first year of this whole thing make it all the way and win the whole thing with a backup quarterback, it looked like they were just kind of just shoving Florida State to the side, even though that was a defense that had many players picked in this NFL draft. College football committee kind of dropped the ball on that, in my opinion. But with that being said, I mean, it was enough for the college football committee to say this quarterback was good enough to where maybe would have let this team in if he was there, but because he was not there, we're just going to ignore this guy, ignore this team. So for the Jets to get this player, it's going to take a little time. He's still got to recover from his injury. I just have hopes that maybe he makes it to training camp and can play in the preseason. That would make this preseason a little more interesting, something to watch for. It'll be our first real look at what Jordan Travis could be as a future quarterback. Because let's be honest here, Aaron Rodgers maybe has 2 years left with the Jets. After that, there's no answer there. So what we really hope is that Jordan Travis can develop into a player that we can rely on as a starter in the future. And our first real look at him in that role would be in the preseason. And I would think being the third quarterback, he would get a little bit of the easier reps going up against, those third, fourth stringers late in the game, second half, where all the starters and second stringers are out. Um, just be able to see what he can do against some level of NFL talent, even though a lot of those players will be cut. But it's just our first good look at him on an NFL roster. The next pick kind of confused me a little bit. Similar player to Braylon Allen, just picked a lot later, obviously, and Isaiah Davis, another running back. Another big guy. I think this might have something to do with just you know power again. I'm not too familiar, but this may also kind of identify a special teams contribution type of player. Who knows how this new kickoff alignment goes and how that all lines up. But this kind of smells like a special teams kind of pick for them to go with another running back so shortly after they just picked a guy who you think would be their running back 2, running back 3 going into the season. Continuing down the board, I'm going to go a little quicker. These are the later round picks. So Quantez Stiggers is a player that, and if you can see here, no college, player that played through a little bit of diversity throughout his, or adversity is the word I meant to say, throughout his career. Left college, had some had a loss in the family, passing of his father, took some time away from football, ended up going to the CFL and impressed enough there, won Rookie of the Year in that league, and obviously put up enough for the Jets to make the pick here, and left enough of an impression where there was a video released by the Jets media team where I think Ulbrich was on the phone, Tony Oden, multiple front office coaches were on the phone and got emotional with the fact that this guy got drafted by the team. So made enough of an impact. I think even like a security guard too, one of their like security members was even there as well. It was kind of a cool moment for a player that seems like just somebody that comes in and just a positive locker room kind of guy, someone who's went through a lot, um, and just happy for him to get picked. Um, Jets give him an opportunity, and we'll see. So we'll see what this develops into. Um, I know he's listed at corner, but when you look at some of his tape, kind of the types of plays he's making, kind of come off as a player that can make those kind of like kind of those deep safety type of plays. I wonder if this is a situation with the Jets having a need at safety. Obviously, if this is a player that kind of fills in like as like a dime type of player, as well as like a safety. Jets have done pretty well over the last few years, taking safeties, whether it be undrafted or really late in the draft. Tony Adams was an undrafted player. He's their starter right now and plays the role pretty well. And then I don't know if it was the year before or a couple years before, we all remember Jason Pinnock um, came in as a starting corner, didn't really work out that position. Late in the season, they played him in safety, played pretty well over a few games. And then the following year, the Jets got kind of cute with the whole situation and tried stashing him on their practice squad. Well, that didn't work out. He got snatched up pretty quickly by the Giants, and he's doing pretty well over there. So I wonder if this is a similar situation where they take a guy normally listed as corner, may struggle at the position. Obviously, nobody knows anything yet. Even from the 11th pick, I mentioned he can play potentially left guard for the year until he's needed at left tackle. But anyway, we're talking about this guy here now. So whenever it's a situation where if he's not your prototypical corner, maybe you move him back in the lineup to safety as like your third safety option. Just something similar to watch there. Just something interesting. And Salah likes to come out with different kinds of looks too. So something to consider there. And as we proceed, the last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. The Jets go with Jalen Key, a safety out of Alabama. When you're drafting this late, I think you're just looking for somebody who you believe can make the team. It's a really late pick. The fact this guy was coached by Nick Saban, that tells me enough. And he plays safety on that defense. It's more than enough for me to kind of consider this just a shot at the dartboard and see what happens. And we will see what happens here. It's just he's not going to get much playing time on this defense. Obviously, as we already mentioned, this just defense is absolutely loaded from top to bottom. Hence why our first five picks were all on the offensive side of the ball. It'll, it'll be a definite transition for him to kind of proceed into maybe potentially being like a role player on this team. Special teams, kind of the name of the game when you get a guy in the fourth to seventh round. Can you play special teams? If you can, then slowly we'll kind of work you in as a special teams core guy. And if you're more than that, you'll work your way into starting lineup in a couple of years, if that's what your career trajectory kind of dictates. But again, overall, if you look at this draft and you look at the top first few picks what the Jets did, I think they addressed exactly what needed to be addressed: offensive line, wide receiver, running back two, and the quarterback position. Get someone in there that can learn, develop, and maybe it makes that decision in a few years of what direction to go at quarterback a little bit easier if this guy can develop. But yeah, let me know how you feel about this draft. I think there's a lot to be positive about. I understand just didn't make that huge splash at the top of the draft with a wide receiver, but I just don't think the trades were there Arizona wasn't trading out of pick 4, obviously, hence why they drafted Marvin Harrison. Giants weren't trading. All the quarterbacks that they wanted were gone already at that point. They take a wide receiver as well. And then when it got to pick 8, I think that was really the pick that you look at that you could potentially trade up to. And I don't think Atlanta had much interest, especially with those quarterback needy teams luring right behind. So again, let me know how you think the Jets did. Again, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. And most importantly, let's go Jets.